Thank you, Femi, and I think I can still say good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here, and I'd like to thank the organisers for the kind invitation to participate in such a wonderful meeting, in particular Gunhild, Johan. The opportunity to be involved in some small way in such a big issue is just a great pleasure and privilege. And I'd like to thank Johan and Gunhild as well for inviting my colleague Rob Bailey and me to collaborate with EAT's partners at the Norwegian Institute for Public Health and the University of Oslo, the Stockholm Resilience Centre, in looking at this project. And as Femi said, it's the first project of its kind as a collaboration with EAT. And I've been asked just to say a few words about what we've been doing over the past 6 months. And you'll see some copies of a report out on the table just outside this auditorium. And this report that Rob and I have written with the help, as I say, of our partners, this was published online on Friday of last week. So it really is hot off the press. And we've brought some copies with us. For those of you who would like to find out more, it would be excellent if you could take the copies, because having carted them all the way over here from London, I don't really want to have to take any back. So help yourselves. Some light reading for you. I start with a confession that I am not a photographer, and I wish I could take such great photographs as the ones that we saw first thing this morning in Matthias's presentation. And I can't think of a better way of communicating the significance and the importance of what it is that we're trying to do at Chatham House. It's another thing whether I want a polar bear or not, but I'm sure the children would really like a polar bear, or some of the animals that Matthias showed us. What I want to do is really just get straight into some of the key issues. I'm very fortunate in having been able to, on the agenda, follow the people that have been talking over the past little while, so I don't need to go through the points that I was going to make. I'm using the word here, pandemic proportions. People talk about epidemic proportions for human obesity. However we describe it, we know that it's just a huge, huge issue in all countries of the world. It is truly a pandemic in my definition of the word. We're talking about 1.9 billion people, adults worldwide, who are now overweight. Of these, about 600 million are classed as obese. These are according to the World Health Organization's figures. And one sobering fact, and I won't go through any more, about 3 million people die each year as a result or linked with overweight and obesity. Environmental costs are very high. We just heard this morning about the cost of irrigation for agriculture and so on. But the good news is, really, what's good for public health is often, not always, but good for the environment. And you've heard quite a bit already in the presentations here this morning. So this is the picture from the front cover of our report. And we want to look at this vexed area of how do you influence behavior. And the intention, as Femi said, is to try and help those people who want to move towards a more healthy and ideally sustainable diet. We looked at sustainable diets. What does it mean? And you heard this morning that there isn't a single definition of, even a definition of a healthy and sustainable diet. Our purpose really was to focus on subsets of the sort of diet that we've been talking about over the past 24, 36 hours. And it was really to look at subsets that involve eating more plants, less meat. We particularly wanted to look at this shift in consumption of palm oil for particular reasons that I'd be very happy to pick up in the break after the discussion. Also to look at less sugar and sugary foods. So we've looked at a range of interventions right along the spectrum, from the informing and empowering, the sort of thing that we talk about as the nudge environment, the choice architecture. You've heard a little bit about that, but right the way through the spectrum of interventions to what is really government action in restricting or banning particular foodstuffs. The work that we're reporting in this research report is also informed by an expert roundtable that was held at Chatham House at the beginning of April. So it's been a sprint through this, and I think we need to look at the maybe the middle distance approach, or even in this for the longer distance, the marathon. But some of the key points, we need clarity on what this healthy and sustainable diet is. As David Katz said this morning, we need to know where there is. And I was really attracted by the definition that he gave, having said there is no single definition, saying eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I think that sums it up really, really succinctly. I've probably misquoted, and my apologies for that if I have. There's a lot of evidence on interventions on the health side. There's some evidence on the environment side. We found there's very little on the interface between the two areas, and particularly when it comes to co-benefits. Little evidence from low and middle income countries, very unfortunately. Can I just check my screen here says time up. It feels as though I haven't really had much time, but I'll race through the rest of our presentation. Into the policy areas, the evidence is really strongest for fiscal measures and the restrictive measures that I talk about at a government level. This is where we can make a global change, the most impact on global change. The nudges, as I've called them, or the information provision, unlikely to be enough on their own, but really have quite an important part to play as part of a composite strategy. So whether we're looking at advertising, information provision, all the way through banning and restricting, these have an important part to play as a composite strategy. Government interventions also can have a signaling effect. So this is just influencing people's behavior. Again, it might be, for example, in looking at product reformulation for industry, or just encouraging consumers to take particular decisions. What I'm talking about on the second bullet point, wider social, economic and political factors being important. This is what we call the macro environment, and it's really shaping the macro context. This can be trade, it can be retail, restaurants, advertisements, and particularly the political economy. We looked, and you'll see in the report, some examples of the political economy, looking at sugar-sweetened beverages, looking at the Mexican situation, looking at the Pacific Islands situation. I don't want to go through the detail, I don't have time, but it really is important to take the wider picture into account, and we need to look very carefully at other sectors, other areas where there have been some very effective interventions. We could take the tobacco industry here in Sweden, looking at the harmful effects of alcohol consumption. So yesterday we had a competence forum. These are the main messages. Of course, it's a complex challenge. Really important that we have a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary approach to this. I don't need to go through that, but a task force inevitably has been suggested with this geographical representation. We're here, and I'm looking at a sea of faces in front of me. we have to look at the countries that are really very affected by this, this challenge. The low and middle income countries, we need to make sure that we're in partnership to really tackle where they're facing the not only the problems from overweight and obesity, but as somebody said this morning, still in parallel looking at undernourishment and hunger still. Quickly on to the inevitable take-home messages. We need to get this traction, and we spend an awful lot of time on the analysis and the diagnosis. We've heard so much about what the problems are. How do we make a change? How do we make that difference? And we've got an opportunity, 2015, 2016, really the next year or so, there is an amazing window of opportunity with the Sustainable Development Goals being adopted in September. But there will be a period in the run-up to that. There are lots of other very high-level meetings, the various G7, G8, G20 meetings that are coming along. We need to capitalize on that and get the traction with policymakers, but also with producers, consumers, public health professionals, business, civil society. These are points that others have made, but it emerges very strongly from the review that we've done and the literature review that went to inform the paper that I've been talking about. I'm a scientist by background. I'm a policy maker within the UK government and internationally for much of my career. It won't surprise you to hear me say that we need to strengthen the evidence base. It really is something that is necessary to help us get that clarity of message for the policymakers in particular. But I'm bound to say, and my final take-home message really is that a lack of evidence shouldn't be in any way an excuse for inaction. We need to build on the, I think, remarkable EAT partnership to help us with this traction that we need to get over the coming weeks, months, and into the marathon that I think stretches before us. And I leave you with the acknowledgements. This is a true collaboration. It really is something that we need to work together on. But I'm quite confident that, as I say, with the people that we have in this room, with the EAT partnership, we really can make a difference. And I look forward to seeing you all here next year and hearing about the progress that's been made. Thank you all very much indeed.